Hi, everybody. Real Estate Ninja here. Let's talk about what's going on in China in regards to Country Garden. Their commercial mortgage back their commercial mortgages are imploding. Their developers are imploding nationwide. They have been going through a multi-year crisis when it comes to massive properties, how leveraged they were, and now the subsequent implosion. And it's interesting to see how they're dealing with it. The news out of BBC says Country Garden, China property giant suspends shares in Hong Kong. It says crisis hit Chinese property developer Country Garden has suspended trade in its shares on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange after delaying the publication of its annual financial results. Now, we've seen this with not only Country Garden, but also Evergrande, where their results are either mixed or they're taking a long time to come out with them. There are so many problems right now in that sector, but I don't want to take your focus away from the U.S. too, because the U.S. is in a horrible situation. Europe is also in a horrible situation, yet our media, the Western media, keeps pointing at China. Look at them, don't look at us, that kind of situation. The firm said last week that it needed more time to collect information as it restructures its debts. It defaulted on overseas debt last year and faces a winding up petition. I want to remind you, when they talk about overseas debts and defaulting on them, they had to default on something. And China came out and said, you're going to pay us first. You're going to continue to pay the people in our country first. So then what they did is they defaulted in the US. And there are a lot of pension funds that are hurting right now, and they don't tell you this, but they invested in overseas investments, some of them being, Evergrande and Country Garden. And when these companies are defaulting on their debts to US pension funds, they don't tell you, they just take the hit and they try and find money somewhere else. But we're seeing US pension funds failing as well. Okay, very, very interesting times. It says Country Garden said due to continuous volatility of the industry, it just means it's falling off a cliff. The operating environment the group confronting is becoming increasingly complex when it announced its earnings report would be delayed. The first hearing for Country Garden's winding up petition, which was filed by Evercredit, is scheduled for May 17th. Evercredit is a unit of Kingboard Holdings, a laminates maker and property investor. The suspension of Country Garden shares came as the Hong Kong stock market reopened after the Easter weekend. Also on Tuesday, shares in Chinese state-backed property developer China Vanke fell to a record low. On Friday, the firm reported a fall of more than 50% in its annual profit and told investors that it aimed to boost its cash flow by slashing debt over the next 2 years. China's real estate industry has been facing a major financial squeeze since 2021 when the government induced measures to curb the amount big developers could borrow. Several large Chinese property developers, including Evergrande, Country Garden, have defaulted on their debts in the last few years. Problems in the country's property market are having a major impact as the sector accounts for around a third of the economy. So now think about this. When the sector accounts for a third of the economy and it's imploding, how bad is it going to get in China? And then you've got to think, okay, if China is that bad, how bad is it going to get here? Because one thing China can do is they can devalue their yuan to make their exports look more attractive to the U.S. But then what does that do to us here? Well, our country starts buying up goods from China super cheap, on the cheap, right? And then there's nobody here. Our manufacturing base isn't able to sell as much. So you've got to think of the long-term repercussions of what's going on. Not only that, when a country the size of China goes completely down, their economy's down, what they say, if all else fails, they take you to war, right? Well, that's when you start taking measures a little bit more drastic. And a lot of people don't understand that. They say, well, if their economy fails, how can they take you to war or go to war? Well, because these countries like China have been building so many aircraft carriers, so many fighters, bullets, manufacturing all this stuff, they're ready to rock and roll. And so you got to think about all of these things together. It says last month, the country's financial markets regulator accused Evergrande and its founder of inflating revenues by $78 billion in the last 2 years before the firm defaulted on its debt. The company's mainland business, Hengjega Real Estate, was fined $583 million, while the CEO faces being banned for life from China's financial markets. Things are getting ugly and they're going to get worse. So just keep that in the back of your mind, what's going on with these other countries and their commercial property markets. It's happening in America as well. It's going to get worse. This is an opportunity. Just like in China, what do they say? The same word for crisis, the same word for opportunity. So that's what you need to be thinking about. Hope you got something from this. Real Estate Ninja is out.